If you have a smart speaker, you have access to the entire world of NPR and St. Louis Public Radio. All the latest news and all the captivating stories. Activate our voices with yours by telling your smart speaker to play St. Louis Public Radio.
From St. Louis Public Radio. This is Politically Speaking. It would be fair to say that Kelli Dunaway has seen a lot as a member of the St. Louis County Council. The Chesterfield Democrat entered elective service at a very fraught time in St. Louis County history, especially when leaders had to make very difficult decisions about the COVID-19 pandemic. On the latest episode of Politically Speaking, Dunaway talks about her decision not to run for another term and some of the takeaways she's had about serving on the council. Let's hit the music.
This is Politically Speaking, the definitive show about politics in the St. Louis region.
I thought this was an opportunity to have a new voice in that seat.
And the decisions I make in county government allows me to help people in large groups, and I enjoy it.
We're not using it as a wedge issue. We're using it more as a, what's right for the region conversation.
We need to know what the issues are in our communities in order to address them.
Because people want to see change, and they want to see a St. Louis that works for everyone.
Some days I need the credit, most days I don't, but most importantly, I have to be able to control how this environment is going to evolve.
We knew that in races that have multiple candidates, the only way you win is in the streets.
And welcome to Politically Speaking. I am your host, St. Louis Public Radio political correspondent Jason Rosenbaum. Joining me in studio, she is the 2nd District Councilwoman on the St. Louis County Council, at least for one more year.
One more year, Kelli Dunaway.
Thank you so much for joining us today. Before we talk about your apparently non-existent political future, just remind our listeners what the boundaries of the 2nd District are.
Well, first of all, thanks so much for having me today, Jason. It's great to be here in person and great chatting with you. I am basically along the river in northwest St. Louis County, Chesterfield at the bottom, up through Maryland Heights, Bridgeton. I've got Hazelwood, a little bit of Florissant, most of the communities around on the west side of the airport, and back down through Creve Coeur.
And you might be one of the first Chesterfield Democrats elected in a long time, but there have been more. Chesterfield has become a little bit swingier since you started running, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I think Biden won Chesterfield by a couple of points in the last election.
I kind of alluded to this at the beginning. You are not running for re-election. What prompted that decision?
Well, first I want to say it really has been an honor, as cliche as it may sound, to serve the constituents of the 2nd District and to serve St. Louis County. But I have served during a very challenging time. I think, the pandemic brought out the worst in all of us in many ways. And that was thrown in my face on a weekly basis. And I felt really unsupported through a lot of that. And like I was kind of alone up there. And I know I wasn't. And really, I was behind a screen, so it wasn't even that I was up there. But it was just really painful. And it was painful not just the people that were being cruel and throwing, terrible words at us in social media and at the council meetings, but also there was a real rift between the Democrats. And that I found to be very painful, too, because for me, I was standing up for saving lives. I was voting to save lives, and I wanted to give our medical professionals enough time to get this under control. And I thought I was doing what was right to save lives. And I didn't feel that way from my colleagues, and I found that to be very painful. So I would say, that was a very long answer to your question, which is, why am I not doing this? Because I've gotten the crap kicked out of me for the last 4 years. It will have been 5 years. And I have repaid all of my karmic sins, and I am ready to go lean into the joy.
We'll talk more about COVID in a minute, but one of the general observations I've had about serving on the county council is it's a big time commitment for a marginal amount of money. So it's $20,000 a year for now. If you would have run again and won, you would have got $40,000. But you just mentioned that the amount of scrutiny you all get honestly feels disproportionate for how much money you're making, to be very frank. how did that dynamic factor into your decision? I mean, your first answer seems to indicate that it factored heavily, but I'd like you to talk about that point.
I mean, it is a huge commitment. And it's not just the time, Jason, or the financial hit that you take, that I took, but like the emotional burden of it all. Because it weighs heavily, like the votes. I used to also get really stressed out about how other people were voting. It used to really weigh on me. Like, how can people not see this I put in air quotes, the right way? And then, during the pandemic, I did like what a lot of people did and sort of turned to my heart and my spiritual connection to the universe, and started to realize, what I can and can't control and how to let go of the rest. But even still, even in my most mindful moments, there has been so much pain and agony and emotional just being distraught with this work and the scrutiny and just the reputation of the council and how we all interact. It's just too much.
I've told my councilwoman, Lisa Clancy, several times after covering county council off and on, I don't necessarily enjoy going to it as much as I used to. And I don't think I've actually explained why to her. She may have seen it as like, what, you don't like me? You don't like anybody on the council? It's like, no, I like everybody on the council. I like everybody who's a countywide official. I've known everybody for a long time, who, especially Wesley Bell, Jake Zimmerman, Sam Page. The thing that has become kind of tiresome for me is I basically feel like I've been covering the same story for 11 years. It's this unending conflict between a majority of the council who are agitating against the county executive. And occasionally it flips to where the council is aligned with the county executive, and there's this period of like detente for a year, but it falls apart. Like, covering that once or twice is fine. Covering it like 60 times, frankly, becomes kind of tiresome. So that's probably more honest than I probably should be as a journalist. But I imagine that as a participant, it was even worse. What do you think about that?
I think you just hit the nail on the head. I think about this all the time when I try to compare my experience in the private sector with my experience in the public sector. And in the private sector, I grew up in big law firms, so not really known for being touchy-feely, kind, and caring about people. That's changing in some ways, but at least there we're all playing by the same set of rules, and we're all on the same team, which is we're here to support our clients, aspire to their potential, right? Like, that's what we do. In government, all it is conflict. Somebody's always in the way of somebody else's progress, and it just feels like this constant fight against and for, and I don't even know why. And it's too much.
And I will just play devil's advocate with myself. I would also be kind of alarmed if every vote was 7-0 and every decision from the county executive was just being rubber stamped. Like, I think that there's good things about conflict. And we could talk about this later with the budget, for example. Like, I watched that debate on, like, I think it was the last council meeting of the year. I didn't see anything inherently wrong with people having different opinions about the budget. I think where it kind of gets tiresome is where it's just kind of like petty retribution back and forth. Like, the county executive does something in the council and the council retaliates and vice versa. What's kind of your thought about that?
I mean, you basically expressed my thoughts. I don't enjoy the ping pong game. I don't want to be there for it. I don't enjoy it. St. Louis County is in a really challenging situation with the budget. And there's just such a huge disconnect between what the public expects from government and what they're willing to pay for it. And this, inflation hit us too. And I'm not trying to make excuses and say, well, we can cut this or we can cut that. But what gets cut, Jason? If times get tough, what gets cut? Senior services, health care for people who have no other health care, transportation. I mean, there's just no place to cut unless we can come up with some fun new ways of raising revenue. The people that are already hurting are going to hurt more.
I think you actually mentioned that at a council meeting where I think it was maybe at the end of 2022, there should be more thought process about creative ways of raising revenue. You mentioned marijuana taxes, which is kind of in flux right now. I think you've even put forward something about naming rights for buildings.
Yes.
Could you talk more about some of those zany, creative ideas to raise revenue that does not involve just raising property taxes.
Well, I love the idea of public-private partnerships. I think this is a great solution in so many ways. And so I'm working on legislation now that would allow the county to sell sponsorships and naming rights for, not parks, but maybe things inside of parks. Biking trails, hiking trails, maybe it's pavilions, whatever. Maybe even renaming streets. Like you want to absorb the cost and you're offended by Dorset? Sweet. You can buy the naming rights and name it whatever. There will be obviously restrictions, and we're trying to figure out what those restrictions are.
I was just going to say, you don't necessarily want a county park to be named after like Marlboro or we've seen this with crypto stuff. Like everything's was named after crypto in 2020 and 2021. I don't know why, because pretty obvious that crypto was a scam then, but now it's like, wow, that was a mistake. We named the Los Angeles Arena after crypto. Like, how do you avoid stuff like that where you get a lucrative offer and you're like, yeah, let's name Lone Oak Park Doge Park or something, and then like a year later Doge went bankrupt because it's essentially a pyramid scheme?
Well, these are the questions that we're trying to answer. These and many others. It would be, just spitballing here, some of the restrictions that I think of would be like no political speech, no hate speech. It would be for a set term of years, so maybe 5 years, and then we can come back and look at it again so that if there is an embarrassing crypto moment, we have some recourse. But this is why I don't have a bill yet. We're still trying to nail down some of these.
Now, not to go back to bad memories, but let's steer the conversation back to COVID-19 for a moment. I think it's pretty clear to say that hindsight is 2020, and like you could Monday morning quarterback any decision that the county executive made. We talked in the last show. I think we could both agree that like knowing what we know now, shutting down parks was probably not a great idea.
Probably not.
And I think that even County Executive Page would admit that. But I think like there was like a lot of scrutiny of things like mask mandates and occupancy restrictions. And you mentioned it before, like the response to it was pretty visceral. It was more than just seeming like a policy disagreement. Why do you think that the reaction to some of these things were what they were?
I think because we were scared. We didn't have any answers. And, not to go back to that moment that Obama had, but, when we're scared and don't know what's going to happen and don't know if we can believe the information we're getting, we cling to what's safe. And I think for a lot of people that turned into rage pretty quickly. I think isolation and people being stuck together also made some unfortunate family situations explosive. And I just think that people got mad. And they got so mad that they just took it out on us and on anybody else that was telling them, or they felt that we're telling them, that they needed to wear a mask, they needed to stay home, they couldn't put their kids in schools.
Now, you weren't the only government that was experiencing this. I spoke with St. Charles County Executive Steve Ellman last year, and he told me flat out he might have run for another term if COVID-19 had never happened, because even a county like St. Charles County, which did not have as many restrictions, this is the sort of thing he had to deal with on a pretty regular basis.
We were the only legislative body that opened every meeting. I think we limited the number of people at the first two meetings, but then we just started letting anybody who wanted to could come in. What we ended up with was you couldn't. Jeff City was closed. All the cities were closed. All the school district boards were closed meetings. What we ended up with for about almost 2 years was anybody who had a gripe about anything showed up at our meetings. And it didn't matter that I would get up and explain that if you have a problem with that, you need to talk to your people in Jeff City, or explain to them that, unless the law is changed, we can't tell the schools what to do when it comes to quarantines and masks. But it just seemed that people were just there to complain, and we were the convenient place to do it. And again, it just got way too personal. And I don't know exactly when all that became acceptable, but I'm just afraid if that continues, you're going to get a situation where reasonable people who have a good job and a nice family and plenty of friends and who just want to give back a little bit, they're gonna join some not-for-profit. They're not going to run for office, and the only people going to run for office are the people on the extreme right and extreme left that want to sit up there and listen to people call them names the way they're doing it now.
So that is St. Charles County Executive Steve Ellman. He's a Republican. He's from a different party from you, but it's almost as if he was like predicting your political future. And what do you make of what he just said?
I agree with everything he said. He's absolutely right. And I mean, I don't think I'm the last person with a good family and a good job and a lot else going on that's going to step away from serving in an elected office like this. But it's certainly what really drove me away.
Do you think, though, that some of the policies that you've supported, like mask mandates in particular, my biggest question about it, and I wasn't somebody who was like, crazily anti-mask, but my question for everybody from people like Nicole Galloway to Sam Page to people like you is, how are you going to equitably enforce this? And I don't think that there was ever a clear answer about this because county government doesn't have 600,000 people that can make sure people aren't wearing a mask enough. So you kind of just have selective enforcement. Do you think that was kind of the problem overall with that type of policy?
I mean, I feel like there's no way to enforce so many of the things that we pass and that we want and that we expect from our friends and neighbors. For me, I was never worried about enforcement. I didn't want the police going and telling people to put on a mask or get out. I just wanted to let the community know, I hear you. I'm here to protect you. I'm here to do my best to use whatever power and influence I have to tell your neighbor to put on a mask.
The last time you were on, we talked about how you were supportive of Sam Page's approach to COVID-19. And I think it's been pretty clear that, as we talked about before, St. Louis County took a more restrictive approach than St. Charles County. Do you think that County Executive Page's approach ended up being the right one? And if so, why?
Yes, because I think lives were saved. And I think we kept our hospitals from being overrun with sick people. And I think we did the best we could with the information that we had available. Would we do things differently in another pandemic? I'm sure. Because we would have lessons learned and mistakes made. And we can see where we went right and wrong. But, I mean, right now, it's still really tough to know.
I mean, you also, I think, on that show talked about how Sam Page was like one of your mentors politically. He's not the warmest or fuzziest political figure, and he's obviously elicited an awful lot of hate for someone who, frankly, is not the most exciting person. But, do you still consider him to be your mentor, or have you kind of soured on him over the last 4 years?
No, I'm still a big fan of Sam Page. I think he's a genuinely decent human being. I think he's a doctor. He knows best. And that can get really annoying sometimes. But I do value his opinion. I seek out his judgment. I think he is a good, decent human.
I think one of the issues that he had, and this is a structural thing that I think is kind of inside baseball, but I think it's important to point out, because he became county executive after somebody resigned, he had to run in 2020, and he had to run in 2022.
Horrible.
So I think that he was constantly under this political fog, which I think is kind of lifted now, because we were talking before the show. When I went to county council this year, I just didn't feel the same type of antagonism I saw in 2020, 2021, 2022. And I think it's possibly because he won, he's there for 4 years, and he's not going to go away. I mean, what's your thought about that?
I think that's part of it. He finally did win a full term of his own. And that is a huge deal. 4 years. Are we really going to keep fighting like this for 4 years? And, there's been some turnover on the council, both on the council person and on the staff side. I think that's really helped. And I think we moved our public comments to the end of the meetings, and they've shortened and they've gotten less hostile from the public. And I think all of those things have contributed to a better atmosphere.
We'll be right back after this quick break with Councilwoman Kelli Dunaway. And we're back on Politically Speaking with St. Louis County Councilwoman Kelli Dunaway. She is a Democrat from Chesterfield. Now, you mentioned the split among Democrats, and I want to be more specific about what we're talking about here. I think the past several years, you and Councilwoman Lisa Clancy have had a pretty noticeable rift at times from Councilwoman Rita Days and Councilwoman Shalonda Webb. I think when Rochelle Walton Gray was on the council, she was more aligned with you two. What do you think was kind of the impetus behind that rift, and how do you think it affected the council dynamics?
It was all COVID, because if you'll remember, Jason, when Rita and I won, Councilwoman Days and I won our special elections in the summer of 19, actually, we came in and Sam was still in this honeymoon phase by taking over from the corrupt prior administration. And we did some really cool things. We passed a red flag law, which gives the St. Louis County Police the ability to take away guns from people who are dangerous. We really stood up for women's reproductive health rights. I just felt like it was a magical time for us. We were doing cool things, progressive things, and we were standing together and having a lot of fun and getting things done. And then COVID hit, boom, and everything changed. We went from, doing all this cool stuff to responding to this health crisis that no one had ever seen or had any idea what to do with. And we were thrust into this stressful situation. We were worried about our families, our own health, our neighbors, our communities. And then, I don't know what happened. I don't know when or how, but I saw Councilwoman Days moving her policy away from what I thought was our policy. Masks, keeping people safe, keeping, occupancy rates low. We were saving lives, and she started turning to the right during that time and siding with the other side. And I was hurt and disappointed by that. And then that rift just got bigger and wider and harder and more complex and more painful.
I mean, one of the sharpest points of this rift was when Shalonda Webb won, there was an element of the council that wanted to keep Lisa Clancy as council chairwoman, even though it was pretty clear that Rita Days was going to win that election when Shalonda Webb was sworn in. I saw that and I was like, I know exactly what's going on here. I know the council dynamics pretty well. They're trying to prevent the new majority from getting the councilwoman chair. Would you at least concede that that wasn't the best thing to do? Because you were part of trying to keep Lisa Clancy on there.
It was a terrible. We made a very bad choice, and that's all I can say about it. I mean, do I regret that? Yes, we should have just let Rita have it. That's where we really screwed up. Is we really just should have let her have it. But I think it wasn't just me. I wasn't the only one that was disappointed and disillusioned and couldn't believe how she was voting on things like masks. I couldn't believe it. And for her to want to be chair after that, I was just like, no way can I support that.
I've asked Councilwoman Days what led to the rift. And I think I don't exactly remember what it was. There have been so many rifts in county council history that I'm just sort of forgetting about it now. But I think it just had to do with Sam Page just not communicating well with her. And, I could see where Councilwoman Days is coming from. She had a long career as a state legislator that was very distinguished. She was the head of the elections division. She probably thought that Sam Page just wasn't showing the right amount of respect for the amount of things she had contributed for, St. Louis County. I would probably have to ask her, but could you at least see her point there if that was the case?
Yes, and I share similar frustrations with the county executive from time to time, and I consider him a friend. And he leaves me out of the loop, and sometimes I find out about things that affect my district in the paper or when a reporter is calling me, and I'm like, I couldn't even get a heads up. I get it. But
The Gateway brings you the day's news each weekday from around the St. Louis region and the state capitals in Jefferson City.
Our schools are accredited. We don't need this bill.
And Springfield.
How many more years must pass before lawmakers see time is of the essence?
I'm Abby Larico. Join me each weekday for The Gateway on the STLPR app or wherever you get podcasts.
It was a bridge too far for me.
So let's talk about let's go into the future. You still have a year left, and you mentioned the budgetary situation for the county is very perilous right now. After like a couple of years of like having the federal money and being able to like bridge a lot of gaps, I think that federal money's gone now. You have like what is it like a $30 million budget deficit, $40 million?
It's 40, yeah.
40, and you have enough. I think you basically have enough in reserves to maybe have a $40 million deficit for one more year. And then after that, you're pretty much out of money. What is the county going to do?
I wish I knew. I mean, I've been here for 4 years. I've been asking the same questions for 4 years. I've been looking for creative solutions for 4 years. I still think we have to find new ways of raising revenue without raising taxes on people who are not willing to pay a dime more for their government. And I get it. Like, look at us. We're confrontational, we don't get along, all of our policies get stalled and all this nonsense. And I think, I mean, I hate to say this because I don't really feel this way, but it's kind of not my problem. I mean, I am going to spend the next year doing what I can to find creative solutions, creative ways to raise revenue. And if anybody out there that's listening has any ideas or wants to help, please call me, because right now I'm a silo trying to figure this out.
You ended up voting for the budget, which County Executive Page criticized pretty substantially, but he was not pleased with what happened. Why did you decide to vote for it?
As I told the county executive at the very beginning of this process, send me a balanced budget and I'll vote for it. He didn't. He left the council no choice but to make cuts of its own. And so there you have it. That's where I was on the end of that.
And I think what the question is, and I think Councilwoman Clancy put this very eloquently when she was on the Politically Speaking Hour on St. Louis on the Air. County residents are going to have to either shift their expectations about what county government could actually deliver for them, or they're just going to have to find ways to pay for it. You can't do both. You can't deficit spend in St. Louis County. It's not the federal government. So I guess my question is, if you don't end up raising the revenue, we talked before about what's going to be cut, transportation, seniors, et cetera. I would imagine it would be cut to a pretty substantial level beyond what you're doing, correct?
Oh, yes. I mean, the things we're talking about cutting already have small budgets, except for maybe public health. But is that really where you want to cut? I mean, I guess some of my colleagues would say that public health is a privilege, not a right. I don't feel that way. I just don't know where else you cut. I mean, there are a lot of employees in St. Louis County that are doing a lot around the clock to fix holes in the roads, to keep lights turned on, to make sure that we're safe. And, you know, public safety is a huge part of our budget. I don't know where to cut.
Yeah, that gets to my favorite topic about Proposition P, which happened before you were in office. I've been saying for years that, like, when St. Louis County residents raised the half-cent sales tax, the promise from the proponents was this was going to have a revolutionary approach to crime in St. Louis County. Now, I'm not saying it was insignificant. I know that St. Louis County police officers were paid more, but I'm not really seeing like a huge difference when it comes to crime. And I think that's kind of one of the perils of like trying to raise revenue and promising things, because if you overpromise and underdeliver, I don't know if people are going to vote for things like that again. So that's more of an observation than a question on kind of my kind of biggest bugaboo about St. Louis County government, but I'd be interested to hear your take on that entire philosophy.
I mean, obviously we needed that Prop B money. We still need it. I just think it costs so much more today to deliver the same level of services and the same types of services as it did 20 years ago. And, you know, if you go on a tour, and you should, like, go see the state-of-the-art tools that our police department is using to fight crime and to stay ahead of it, go ride with them. I do from time to time. It is truly extraordinary to see these mostly men, but women too, going out there and putting their lives in danger to get bad guys off the street and keep us safe. They deserve to be paid well for that.
I was going to say, like, we talked about this at the beginning of the show. Like, I'm probably going to be more inclined philosophically to agree, like, elected officials should be paid more. So therefore, I definitely think people who are like police officers or corrections officials or child abuse investigators should be paid more. I remember vividly what was promised with Prop P. And yeah, a lot of that may have been political, and it may have been trying to get Steve Stenger reelected. But like, that's not an insignificant amount of money that's been raised. And I think that the question I always pose to policymakers is, if the money is not actually achieving the policy aim that you aimed to do at the first place, is it just a failure, even if it did good things like pay police officers better?
It's a really good question. I think part of it is naivety. You think you get this, whatever. I don't even remember how much Prop P brings in. I'm embarrassed to say.
I think it's a lot.
It's a lot.
It's a lot more than the city, for sure.
It's like $100 million or more.
Yeah.
And obviously we need it. We need it to pay police officers. We need to pay for this state-of-the-art police stuff we have. I think all of that stuff costs a lot more. And let me just, I don't know what the state of the police department was before Prop P, but I have one example. Since I came on board, I have spent some time out with the 911 dispatchers, seeing what happens when they take a call, how they dispatch the police. And they were using a system that was designed to dispatch school buses until we used ARPA money to upgrade their system because it was $5 million and they couldn't even there wasn't $5 million anywhere to be able to do that. And so I think there were probably a lot of old systems that had to be upgraded and changed over, which makes fighting crime a little easier because now you have a computer and you can look up all the things you need to do as you're on the go. It's pretty cool. And I suspect that took part of the money. I'm just guessing, but I also think that things cost more than people think they do.
So one of the other things that I noticed that you voted against, kind of one of the county executive's priorities, was this package for Boeing. And I think what you told my colleague, St. Louis Public Radio's Eric Schmid, was you voted against the senior tax freeze, but then you had a lot of trouble then just voting for this Boeing package if you were not going to give a tax break to seniors who are largely on fixed incomes. I thought that was a really interesting, such a boring word, but I thought it was very notable that you were like thinking out loud like that, and I'd like you to elaborate on that.
So it's kind of a long story, but I had a constituent some time ago reach out to me after I had awarded, or it wasn't just me, it takes 7 votes, but I pushed forward a Chapter 100 bond for a constituent company. It's like a TIF, but smaller. And it allegedly keeps businesses in the district and growing and spending more money and whatnot. And a constituent reached out and was like, why are you giving away corporate welfare? And I was like, is that what this is? So I did some research. I called some people. I got my homework on all these different kinds of TIFs and Chapter 100 bonds and these other incentives to keep businesses here. And there isn't data that shows if they actually are successful, if they do what they say they're going to do. There's all this theory and hype that it is our job to bribe our companies to stay here. And I don't like it. I don't like it unless they're also willing to spend at least half of the tax break on maybe naming rights or on building a community center in North County or on some other give back. You want me to give you $150 million in tax breaks? Well, then what are you going to do in exchange? Stay here? Like maybe create 5,000 new jobs, but maybe lose 2,500 others? I understand the criticisms. Believe me, this was a really hard call for me to make. Makes it easier that I was the only one.
Yeah, when it's 6-1 and it's not, you were at the crucial vote, you can have some leeway to make decisions like this, but continue.
And that's what it was. Like, it was a hard vote because I agree. St. Louis has lost so many of our hometown companies through mergers and through moving out. And I get that we need to invest in keeping businesses here, but not while we ourselves are on the brink of bankruptcy and they're not offering to give anything back.
So in the final few minutes we've spoken about a lot of negative stuff that's happened to you. What was your favorite thing about being on the council?
My favorite thing about being on the council was that I have gotten to see the work that so many truly heroic people are doing in our community. People working for nonprofits, people who are like a phoenix, like fly out of the dust of their own loss to do more for the community. It's just been such an honor to be a part of that. I see amazing businesses doing really cool and innovative things, especially in my district, because we've got the plant science and it's just really cool. It's been an honor getting really to learn about the people and the work that's being done here that makes this such an amazing place to live.
So there are several people who are lining up to try and replace you. It's a fairly Democratic district. Although I did think that your special election was interesting because you were running against another elected official who's now the mayor of St. Anne, by the way.
Yes, she is.
Also, lovely person. But this is a Democratic district, so whoever wins the Democratic primary is probably going to replace you. What sort of words of warning or advice would you have for your successor?
I think keep an open mind, listen to all sides, listen to everybody, and just be kind.
Please be kind to people.
Please be kind.
Thank you so much for coming here today. And even though I don't think we'll ever have you back.
Oh, that's so sad.
You just got to run for something else.
Ooh.
Like run for state rep or Congress again or something like that. But I don't think that's going to happen.
Probably not.
Point. For all of our stories, go to stlpr.org. Politically Speaking is a product of St. Louis Public Radio, which is a part of the University of Missouri-St. Louis. And Councilwoman, I know that you're probably trying to stay away from social media since it has not been very kind to council members. But is there any way, or is there any place on social media where you want to be found?
Not really, no.
All right. You're the first guest to say that. Thanks for breaking some new ground there.
Thanks so much for having me, Jason. It's been really great.
Thank you, and so long. Politically Speaking is produced by Sarah Kellogg, Rachel Lippman, and me, Jason Rosenbaum. The show is edited by Fred Ehrlich. Read all of our coverage at stlpr.org. And if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to Politically Speaking by searching the term Politically Speaking on Apple Podcasts.